My mother-in-law accused me of trying to take over the family properties after snooping through my things. But in front of everyone, I told them it was actually a trap set by her own son. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. We've lived together for the last 2, and we've been married for 1. Our relationship is pretty peaceful, if you ignore the demon that is my mother-in-law. Honestly though, I don't even feel bad saying that, because she doesn't seem to get along with many people anyway. So we've made our peace with it. We keep things cordial. We invite her to dinners and events, and she does the same. But we don't have a deep or warm relationship. A few months ago, my father-in-law passed away from a heart attack. That really made me want to be more understanding toward my mother-in-law. I lost my dad when I was really young, so I know how that kind of loss can shake a family, especially the mother. I remember how hard it was for my mom after my father died. So, I made a real effort to be kinder to her. We decided to start inviting her to dinner every other weekend. And at first, I could tell she was actually grateful for it. But after that, I don't know why, things started to get weird. She began snooping around our house. It took us a while to notice, but after a few visits, we were pretty sure that's exactly what she was doing. Every time, either before or after dinner, she would excuse herself to go to the bathroom. She'd take a long time, but we just assumed maybe the food didn't sit right with her or something. Then, she started bringing up things she couldn't possibly know, things we had never told her. When we asked how she knew, she'd just say, "Oh, I guessed." But we weren't stupid. There was no way anyone could guess that accurately, that consistently. For example, a few weeks ago, she somehow found out that my husband was considering a merger with another company. She's always been against those kinds of moves. She believes it shows weakness and dishonors the legacy her husband built. She confronted my husband about it, and we were totally confused about how she even knew. Neither of us had said a word to her. We were planning to break the news to her gently, knowing she wouldn't take it well. But she already knew, and that was the end of it. They had a small argument, and in the end, my husband gave up on the plan. He didn't want to upset her further, especially with the grief still fresh. Still, we couldn't figure out how she knew. That was, until 2 weeks ago. After dinner, she confronted me about my plans to freeze my eggs. I had never told anyone about that, only my husband. When I asked how she knew, she just shrugged and said she got lucky with her guesses. Then she gave me a whole speech about how wrong it was. She based her opinion purely on her own feelings, not facts. She said I was young and should just start having kids instead of wasting time working all day. According to her, things would be better for everyone if I just focused on building a family. Obviously, I was furious. Somehow, she was finding out things she had no business knowing. By that point, we'd already started to suspect she was snooping every time she visited. It wasn't hard to figure out. Our home office is right across from the bathroom, and we realized she was probably lying about needing to use it. We guessed she was taking a few extra minutes to dig through our papers. My husband's merger documents were in the office. And I had tabs open on my laptop, doing research on egg freezing, just before she arrived that day. That explained everything. There were a couple of other minor incidents too, not worth going into, but they added up. So, after that dinner 2 weeks ago, when she left right after giving me her lecture about family values, I hit my limit. I told my husband I couldn't take it anymore. I had tried so hard to be understanding. Even though she'd made it clear from day one that she didn't like me, I had still reached out. But now she was crossing boundaries. I thought maybe we'd need to cut back on how often we saw her. Because things were clearly getting out of control. And of course, if we confronted her about the snooping, she'd just deny it and somehow turn herself into the victim. So we knew there was no point in confronting her. My husband agreed she had crossed the line, and something had to be done about it. We spent a few days really upset over the whole thing. But then my husband came up with a plan to mess with her, and honestly, it was brilliant. It was the perfect way to prove once and for all that she had been snooping through our things. We decided to print out a fake divorce petition and made sure it looked real enough to fool anyone. We even crafted the terms of the petition to be ridiculously unfair to my husband. We laughed so hard while writing it because it was honestly hilarious. In the fake document, I was supposedly trying to take over all the property that belonged to him and his family. We knew this would absolutely enrage my mother-in-law. She already hated the fact that her son had married someone from a less privileged family than hers. I'm not saying I grew up poor or anything, but in her mind, crossing certain zip codes is basically like being a peasant. My husband isn't snobbish about any of that, unlike his mother. Anyway, we knew this would push her buttons, and our plan worked perfectly. A couple of days ago, we invited her over for dinner. But this time, we also invited other family members. We made it a big family dinner. My sister-in-law came with her husband and kids, along with my husband's aunt and uncle. I get along well with them, and I knew they'd probably get a good laugh out of what we had planned. We were all having a good time after dinner when, as usual, my mother-in-law excused herself to go to the bathroom. But this time, she didn't come back for almost 30 minutes. Of course, we knew exactly what she was doing. But my sister-in-law started asking if she was okay. We told her not to worry. We joked that maybe something about our house just helped her digest better, and that it was totally normal. Just as we expected, a few minutes later, after everyone started getting a little concerned, my mother-in-law stormed back into the living room. She was furious, waving the divorce papers we had intentionally planted in one of the drawers in the office. She started yelling at me, calling me every name in the book. She said I was exactly the kind of person she always suspected I was. That she never should have let her son marry me. That I was clearly just waiting for the first opportunity to ruin his life. Obviously, my husband and I weren't surprised at all. This was exactly what we expected. But everyone else was completely confused and started asking what was going on. That's when she told them she had found divorce papers in the office. She started ranting to everyone that I had filed for divorce. My sister-in-law's husband asked, "So, you weren't actually in the bathroom?" She shot him a dirty look and continued with her tirade. According to the terms of the fake petition, I was supposedly going after everything. All the property, even the business. She accused me of plotting this ever since my father-in-law passed away. Claiming I had waited for the perfect moment to show my true colors. She called me a gold digger, a snake, and said she wished the worst for me. Meanwhile, my husband and I stayed completely calm. I didn't lose my temper. We had all seen this coming. We waited patiently until she finally ran out of steam. Then we told her the truth. We said the whole thing was a trap. We printed those papers ourselves. And we'd left them there on purpose because we knew exactly what she would do. I told her it was pretty stupid to think that even if I were filing for divorce, I'd just leave the papers lying around in the shared office we both use all the time. That's when she finally looked confused. She glanced back down at the papers, flipping through them again, and started to realize she'd been played. I explained that the entire setup was to prove she had been snooping around every time she visited. We made sure to have other family members there when she threw her tantrum, so they could all see exactly the kind of person she really was. How much she hated me. Even though I had never done anything to her. And had tried so hard to be kind over the past few months. But she wasn't grateful. She was selfish. A woman who couldn't see the good in anyone. After everything she said, we told her there was no way we'd let her stay involved in our lives. We were done. That level of disrespect was the final straw. That's when she suddenly started crying, saying we had tricked her. Which, of course, we had. But it was the only way to bring the truth into the light. And now? We don't want anything more to do with her. After that, the dinner ended on a bitter note. And everyone else who was there decided not to talk about it any further. But my mother-in-law has been seeking sympathy from anyone who'll listen. At this point, nearly the whole family knows what happened that night at dinner. Some people have been sympathetic toward her. Others have messaged us to say we did the right thing. But everyone seems to have an opinion on the matter. Honestly, we don't really care about any of that. What we do believe, however, is that my mother-in-law has taken this really badly. Not only has she been telling everyone her side of the story, but she's also been sending messages to my husband and trying to call him from time to time. She's been saying that I'm a malicious daughter-in-law, that I've turned his head and filled it with all kinds of nonsense about her. She's been telling him I'm manipulating him against her, and that eventually I'll destroy this family. Because, apparently, if I'm capable of pulling off something like this, then I'm capable of doing much worse in the future. The funniest part is that the whole idea was actually my husband's. Even though he knew his mother had just lost her husband a few months ago, he felt that she had crossed a serious line and that something had to be done. He also understood that she was probably just trying to look after her son, like any mother would. And maybe that's why she'd been snooping around. Now, even though it was my husband's idea, I fully agreed to it. The only part one feels somewhat guilty about is that we did it just a couple of months after her husband's death. I know she was truly devastated after that. And that's the only part that's weighing on me. It's the one thing my conscience is poking at. So, do you think I should apologize for that? Just that part, nothing else. Edit. The reason my husband hasn't blocked his mother yet is because she's obviously older now, and he doesn't want to do something he might regret if anything were to happen to her. I think that's a pretty valid reason not to block her, even though she's been absolutely awful to us these past few weeks, and we really don't want anything to do with her at the moment. But just in case of emergencies, we still want to be reachable. Otherwise, I think it would be something truly unforgivable. Update 1. I hope you're all doing well. It's been 6 days since my last update, and we've stopped feeling guilty about what we did. Not because we don't care, honestly, if she hadn't been snooping, if she hadn't gone out of her way to actively look for what we were doing, instead of just doing the right thing and waiting for us to come to her with whatever news we had, then none of this would have happened. And besides, there was no need for her to make such a huge scene at the family dinner. If she really was so upset about what she had found, she could have waited and confronted us in private. Maybe then it would have been less embarrassing for her once she realized she was wrong. But no, she immediately assumed the worst, decided to confront me in public, and tried to humiliate me. She said the most horrible things about me, so I really don't think I should feel bad about what I did. The fact that her husband passed away recently is sad, but it's not an excuse for her behavior. Honestly. Anyway, like I mentioned, some people reached out to us to say that we did the right thing, because the rumors really were spreading throughout the family, thanks to my mother-in-law. I don't know why she had to go and tell the whole family just to gain some sympathy. If anything, that just pushed us further away from her, because at least we weren't running around telling everyone what happened, trying to paint ourselves as the victims. Yes, what we did at the dinner maybe wasn't the nicest thing. Maybe we shouldn't have invited other family members. But they are very close to us, and we didn't want her to be able to deny her behavior later. Because I'm pretty sure she would have. Well, at least now everyone knows the truth. They can decide and form their own opinions, and slowly that number has been growing. Because like I said from the beginning, there are a lot of people in the family who don't get along with my mother-in-law. She's just not a very pleasant person in general and tends to look down on people, not just me in particular. She always has something negative to say about everyone. So she already has a reputation, a very bad one, and this situation hasn't helped her. I'm honestly glad this backfired on her, because she's the one who started gossiping about the whole thing. Of course, the people who were at the family dinner haven't said anything about it, and they made it very clear that they're perfectly fine being on good terms with us. They just don't want to get involved in the drama, and we respect that. We even apologized to them for dragging them into this mess, but we also explained our side of the story. It was important that they were there at dinner so they could witness my mother-in-law's behavior firsthand and so that she couldn't deny it later. And they understood that. So everything is fine between us, and we respect their decision to stay out of the drama. Honestly, we wouldn't want to be in their position either. And I'm pretty sure there are some people who are still sympathetic toward my mother-in-law. they can keep doing that. Most of them are the older folks in the family, and they've also made their views clear. Not that they've contacted me directly or anything, but I've heard from others that these older relatives are on my mother-in-law's side. They've been telling people not to talk to us and trying to pressure us into apologizing. Well, this will probably go on for a while, I can see it coming. But I'm glad we have at least some support on our side. Even without it, I think my husband and I would have been enough for each other. But we're grateful for what we do have. Update 2. Basically, during the first few days after my last update, we didn't hear anything from her, and everything seemed fine. We thought things were finally going to settle down. But then she decided to send my husband a very cruel email about me. She said that everything I wrote in the petition would eventually come true one day, and when that day came, my husband would regret not listening to his mother about me. Because she knew I was only after him for his money and social status, nothing more. She said she knows what kind of woman I am, and that if I was capable of stooping so low just to put her in her place, there's no telling what else I might be capable of. She also said that one day he'd come crawling back to her for comfort, but she wouldn't be there for him. Because she'd be too hurt that, in such an extreme situation, he chose me over her. And the worst part is, she still had no idea that the entire plan wasn't even mine. It was her son's idea. After that horrible message about me, my husband decided to tell her that it wasn't even my idea, that the whole thing was his plan. Because he was just tired of her constantly meddling in his life. This wasn't new, she had always been like this since he was a child. She always tried to control him. She never liked his girlfriends and basically didn't like anyone he was ever romantically involved with. Obviously, I was the latest one, and of course, she didn't like me either. He never understood why, since I had never done anything to make her feel that way. In fact, despite her behavior, I had always maintained my dignity and been civil and polite with her. After he told her that it had been his idea, he thought maybe she would finally calm down with me. But then she decided to twist everything around and somehow still make it my fault. I don't even know how that was possible. I have to say, I was pretty surprised. Anyway, when she found out it had been his idea, she took a couple of hours and then finally replied. She said it didn't matter whose idea it had been, what mattered was that I had agreed to it. And that if I really respected her as my mother-in-law, I would never have accepted something so low and disgusting. So, surprise, surprise, it was still my fault. And she wasn't willing to admit that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't to blame in this situation. It's literally insane. When she started blaming me for everything again, my husband had finally had enough. He had handed her the truth on a silver platter, that it had been his idea all along and I had nothing to do with it aside from supporting him. But even then, she somehow turned it into something ugly and made it my fault. Saying that I probably turned him against her in order to do something like this. That was the last straw for him. So, he decided to block her. And honestly, it was about time. She had been testing limits for a while, and she had definitely crossed the line. I was personally quite happy that he had finally decided to block her, because I really didn't want this kind of drama to keep going. It was becoming exhausting. So, after he blocked her, we thought that would finally be the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. Because my mother-in-law decided to show up at our house the next day. She couldn't get in contact with him, and for a narcissist like her, that's the worst thing in the world. To be precise, yes, she only came to confront her son. And she made that very clear when I tried to talk to her. We opened the door and let her in because we were trying to be polite. But the moment she stepped inside, she started yelling at my husband. She said he was letting himself be manipulated by me and that he needed to be smarter about what he was doing. That he looked like an idiot because he was letting himself be so easily controlled by someone like me. She emphasized that last part, implying that I wasn't very intelligent and that it was pathetic that I could manipulate him. She said she wasn't going to allow him to treat her that way, especially after losing her husband so recently, because it wasn't right, and he needed to know that. She told him he was going down the wrong path, and the only solution would be to get me out of his life somehow. And if he couldn't do that, the least he could do was teach me to be more respectful toward her instead of being so disgusting. I didn't like that one bit. I tried to speak up and told her she couldn't talk to me like that. And then she literally turned around, got in my face, invaded my personal space, and started saying I had no right to tell her what she could or couldn't do under her son's roof. She even started wagging her finger in my face. It was absolutely insane. I grabbed her finger and pushed it back to her own nose because no one is going to come into my house and speak to me that way. And when my husband saw what was happening and that I was losing my patience, he physically grabbed her by the arm and told her he didn't trust her anymore, especially after everything that had been said and done. My mother-in-law didn't like that one bit. She started crying, saying she couldn't believe he would treat her like that after everything she had lost in life. She claimed she was just trying to protect him from me. She said people like me don't deserve him and that he should know that. At that point, I was completely done with the whole situation. So, I told my husband I was going out for a walk and would come back after she left. Because I really didn't want to ruin my mood by dealing with her. It was a Sunday, and I'd had a pretty hectic week, so I didn't want to let her ruin my weekend. I went out for a walk, came back about an hour later, and by then, thankfully, she was gone. So that was it. And now, we're not talking to her. And we're quite happy with that, because honestly, we have nothing to say to her. And I hope she has nothing more to say to us either. I think she's caused us enough trouble. We don't need any more. Update 3. I have good news. A couple of weeks ago, my husband and I found out that I'm pregnant. I had been thinking about freezing my eggs, but I guess that's no longer necessary. We thought it over and decided to go ahead with it because now is a good time. We recently announced it on social media, and everyone congratulated us. But of course, my mother-in-law had something negative to say. She had been blocked everywhere, so she decided to contact us through a new email account. She told my husband that now that he was going to start a family with me, he was going to see my true colors. She wished him luck, saying he was definitely going to need it. Obviously, she will have nothing to do with me, with my husband, or with her future grandchild. That email sealed her fate. She was very passive-aggressive about it, but oh well. We're happy, and that's something she can't take away from us, no matter how hard she tries. Update 4. I can't believe it's already been a year since I last wrote. Back then, I had my problems with my mother-in-law, but now we're best friends. Well, that last part isn't true, but I have become a mother. And so much more has changed in my life, in our lives, over the past year, besides just the situation with my mother-in-law. Our baby girl was born healthy and strong, and we're so happy with her. It's been hard adapting to parenthood, but I think we've got it all figured out now. As for my mother-in-law, she tried everything she could to bother me during my pregnancy, but she didn't succeed. She didn't go down the usual road of messaging me from different numbers or trying to turn people against me, which is what you'd expect from someone like her. Instead, she tried to make my husband jealous so that he'd leave me, and then she did something even crazier. Just a few weeks or months after my last update, she started inviting a young man over for dinner at her house, someone young like my husband. You might be thinking, she got herself a lover? Good for her. But no, it wasn't a new son she adopted, not legally, of course, but someone she brought in to replace my husband. She started telling other people that he was the son every mother wishes for, that he did for her what my husband wouldn't. He loved her, listened to her, and cared for her like a real son. My husband didn't care one bit. In fact, he thought what she was doing was hilarious. She said she had stomach problems and we thought it was cute, now it's just sad, he said. When she saw that my husband didn't care and kept living his life like nothing had changed, which wasn't what she intended, she escalated her efforts. She started going to the family business, claiming her new son should start learning how it all worked. However, the business is entirely under my husband's control. His sister owns a share, but she's not involved in the business and has her own career. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, received her house and some money. So it's not up to her who works there. Eventually, she must have thought none of this was working and felt the need to escalate again, or maybe she just gave up pretending and stopped hiding it. She started openly dating her new adopted son, or at least she made it public. Now there are rumors that she might even marry him. That might be true, or it might just be more gossip meant to annoy us. But my husband and sister-in-law don't care. As I explained, she has no part in the business, and all she'll do is ruin her own future if anything bad happens. Other than hoping she doesn't do anything foolish, my husband's not going to lift a finger for her. He's tired of trying. Like when we invited her into our home after her husband passed, because she was struggling. But if we count from the moment she introduced this guy as her son to when she started dating him, it's been barely 5 months since her husband passed, and she was already in a new relationship. To me, it seems like a clear case of emotional incest. It would have been better if she had just introduced him as her boyfriend from the start rather than first calling him her son. To me, it all feels like some twisted fantasy. Anyway, I'm sure my mother-in-law has done more things during this time, but we've been busy with my pregnancy and now our daughter, so that's all we've heard about or found out so far. Update 5. About 2 years ago, my mother-in-law got married. We were invited to the wedding, but very few people showed up, not even her own sister wanted to go to what she called that nonsense. She was married for a little over a year until he asked her for a divorce. But during all that time, she paid for the trips they took together, his car, and other expenses he had, since his income as a personal trainer wasn't high enough to sustain that kind of lifestyle. She even put the house they lived in under his name as well. As a result, she burned through her savings, had to sell the house in the divorce to split the assets, and ended up moving into a much smaller home. Of course, she asked my husband to help her buy out her soon-to-be ex-husband's share because she didn't want the family home to leave the family. But my husband offered to buy the entire property instead, since he wasn't planning to help her otherwise. So my mother-in-law agreed, though in the meantime she threw several fits because her son wasn't helping her, and all that drama. We've now moved into that house, which is much bigger, after doing some renovations. My mother-in-law at least managed to buy herself a new house with the portion she got from selling the old one. But as for her personal finances, things aren't looking good. She's been asking both my husband and my sister-in-law for money. Neither of them wants to give her anything, especially my sister-in-law. She was the most vocal in telling her it was a mistake to marry that man. I guess she inherited some traits from her mother, but unlike her mother, she was right this time. So that's where things stand with my mother-in-law. Sometimes I think that her jealousy, hatred toward me, and all that venom she carried inside led her to make the worst possible decisions. That's why whenever I hear something new about her and start to feel like I hate her, I try to calm myself, because I don't want to end up like her. Hatred has consumed her, and I don't want to go down that same path.